Well, here goes. You see, the Bible says that God is holy, and heaven is holy, and the word holy just means perfect. It's important to understand that God cannot let anything imperfect into heaven, otherwise, well, there wouldn't be heaven now, would it? The Bible also says that all of us, well, we've got a body and a soul. And at death, our bodies, well, they're either buried or cremated. There it goes. But you see, your soul, which is like the real you, well, that lives on forever, either in heaven or hell, and ultimately there's no third place for it to go. But unfortunately, we've got a bit of a problem, because the Bible says that if we've broken just one of God's laws, you know, if you've ever lied once, cheated once, hated once, just once, like we all have, let's be honest, then our soul becomes imperfect and we cannot enter heaven. We become like a lost soul. Now, let me ask you just a quick question, but do you know anyone that's never broken any of God's laws? Well, the answer is obviously no, and neither do I. See, here's our problem. You see, all people have broken God's laws. Therefore, all people have, if you watch it, imperfect souls. So if that makes any sense too, then think of the logic of this. But if at death, if your soul could either go to heaven or hell, but to get to heaven, you've got to have this perfect record, and none of us have a perfect record, then that means, sadly, all of us must be headed for hell. So we got to hell quite quickly now, didn't we? Now, people turn around to me and say, Tony, that seems really harsh. And they say to me, how can a loving God make a place called hell, let alone send someone there? I mean, a loving God would never do that, would he? Well, let me explain to you why God would make a place called hell. I want you to think of someone in your life that you love very much. Now, we live in a harsh world, don't we? So let's say, God forbid, the person that you loved was brutally murdered. Boom, they're shot. They catch the murderer, who's brought before a court of law. There he is on the right-hand side, and the murderer pleads guilty. But to your horror, the judge turns around and says, well, this is a really bad thing that you've done, but because I'm a loving judge, well, I'm just going to let you off. Now, for goodness sake, we're all going to be just slightly upset about that, don't you think? We're going to be upset. But why? We're going to be angry because you know that when someone's broken the law, they've got to be punished. Otherwise, there is no justice. So you see, hell is not a love issue. In fact, it never was. Hell's a justice issue. Now, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that someone asked me that really helped me understand why God would make a place called hell. But I've told lies in my life, which pretty makes me a liar, you know? Have you ever told a lie in your life?
Yes. Okay,
and you know, everybody else that's honest, you know, if they told a lie, they'll be honest and, you know, they'll put their hand up to that. And if they don't, that's probably the second lie they're going to tell. So that we're guilty of being liars, all of us. Now, have you ever taken anything that doesn't belong to you? Like, you know, gone to IKEA shopping and nicked one of those little IKEA pencils, or gone to work late, or left work early, got paid for it, or taken a CD and copied it and didn't get the copyright permission?
Oh, gosh.
You know, anything like that. Have you ever taken anything like that?
Yeah.
Well, if you have, that means you're guilty of being a thief, and I'm worse than you. So already we've just proven that we're just a bunch of thieving liars. Now, do you think God will let a bunch of thieving liars like you and me into heaven? Well, you see, I don't really think he would, because if he did, I reckon he would be the same as that unjust judge who failed to punish the murderer of the one you love. You see, we really can't have it both ways. But people turn around to me very quickly and they say, but Tony, wait a minute, I'm a good person. You know, I go to church, I give to charities, I don't swear or whatever, you know, and lying and stealing is one thing, but I'm not as bad as you, Tony. I've never murdered a person. I'm not a murderer, for goodness sake. But you see, what I think is really interesting is the way Jesus redefines words like murder. Because the Bible says that if you've ever hated someone in your heart, you've actually murdered them in your heart. So you see, in criminal law, you've got to do the crime to be guilty, but in God's law, you've merely got to think it and you're guilty. So last question, have you ever hated in your life? Well, if the answer is yes, then that means you're guilty of being a murderer as well. So we're now lying, thieving murderers. Now this is getting better and better, isn't it? Now that's only 3 of the 10 commandments. Trust me, I'm not going to go through the other 7 because you'll probably get embarrassed. But if God was going to judge you and me by the 10 commandments, would we be innocent or guilty? Please tell me.
I'm guilty.
We'll be guilty, absolutely. And that's the bad news. For the sake of justice, there's got to be a place called hell. But you see, the only reason why I've come to Canada is really just to bring a whole lot of good news. You see, we can all be forgiven. And that's the reason why Jesus is my superhero. And I'd literally rather be dead than not speak about him, because of what he's done for my life. I mean, he's amazing for so many reasons. Here's 2 for you. Okay. For a start, I'm amazed by the way he split the timeline. You know, BC, AD, Christmas, and Easter. I mean, all of those events in our diaries are actually based around his life, and yet most people seem to have forgotten that. But by far the most amazing thing about him is the difference between his soul and our souls. Because we're all imperfect for breaking his laws, but you see, Jesus, well, he's perfect. Now let me show you what happened 2,000 years ago before he came to this planet. Jesus looked forward in time and he saw you and me here today. There's Jesus on the right-hand side, and there's God the Father sitting on the throne. And Jesus turned around to God and he said, well, Father, I really love those people in Canada, and I don't want them to go to hell for breaking your laws. Is there a way for them to be forgiven? And that's when God turned around to Jesus and said, well, Jesus, there's one way. My son, I love you. But if you go to earth and you become a human being and you live a perfect life on earth like no one else ever has, and then you die a cruel, painful death on a cross and be totally abandoned to take the punishment which all those people in Canada justly deserve for breaking my laws. I mean, we just spoke about justice, didn't we?
Exactly.
Then I'll make it possible for every one of them to be forgiven when they ask you to exchange their imperfect record for your perfect record. And in that moment, Jesus said, well, I'll do it because I love every single one of those people in Canada and everybody in the whole wide world. And according to this world's history books, the man Jesus Christ came to this world and he laid down his life for you and for me. And in my opinion, and of course that's just my opinion, there's no greater love than that. But there's still something that we must do to be forgiven. And that's what I want to lead on to now. Because the Bible says that there are three major events in our lives. There's birth and death, which ultimately we have no control over. But the third major event in our life which we do have control over is that day when we ask Jesus to forgive us. Is that day when we actually ask him to give us his perfect record. Now you see, we're not forgiven by being christened, baptized, confirmed, or praying, or going to church, or believing God exists, or trying to be good, or getting religious. Oh yeah, these are good things, but none of them give us forgiveness. Jesus said there's only two things that will. And here are those two things that Michael came to tell me in that prison in Cyprus. The first one is that we must be willing to turn away from anything that we know is wrong in our lives and say sorry to Jesus. And don't just stop there. Continue being willing until the day you die. But please notice what I'm saying to you is willing. There may be some things in our lives that we feel powerless to give up on our own strength, and that's okay. That really is okay, because God will help us with those things. But we must be willing and want to turn away from them and say sorry to Jesus. The second thing he said we must do to be forgiven is that we must surrender our lives to Jesus. And all surrender means is this. It means that if God made you in your mother's womb, and if God made the entire universe that surrounds you, well, don't you think God deserves to be the central person in your life? And that's all the word surrender means. Surrender is just a huge change of attitude where we begin to acknowledge that Jesus is God. And we start to put our money where our mouth is day by day and start to walk the talk, not just on Sunday, but Monday to Saturday as well. And to surrender our decisions and our choices and our time and our money and our lifestyles and our control to him. It's so hard. It's a lifelong struggle. But unless we're willing to those two things, it's impossible to be forgiven, and at death it's impossible to enter heaven. But let's say, for example, you decided to turn and surrender and be forgiven, okay? Well, this is what it'd be like for you at death. I love this bit because it's going to summarize your whole